Welcome again to the Volvo Ocean Race. This is leg 11, the final showdown, and we are 1 day and 1 hour into the last leg. And we've got a bit of a treat for you here, folks, because we have got Dongfeng Racing and Mapfre, as seen here, entering the port of Aarhus in Denmark. Now, this is a little bit of a flyby that we've organized into downtown Aarhus. There are literally thousands of people lining the docks, waiting with bated breath as to see which one of these red boats is going to make it in and out cleanly, and whether this could be a pivotal moment in the course of this last leg, with so much to play for when it comes down to The Hague. I'm here in Alicante, and well, I was about to do the introductions, but we've just seen Dongfeng Race Team tacking off. They're currently sailing upwind in about 18 to 20 knots of wind, so plenty on at the moment. But just to give you an idea of what is waiting for you here, I'm here in Alicante. I'm joined by Sally Barco, who has been the voice of wisdom all the way around the world, trying to keep Andy Green a little bit honest, shall we say, when it comes to the import racing. Sally?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me here. This is quite a treat we have.
Yeah, it certainly is, and it's cool to have these helicopter images. And then also, I've got my normal co-host, presenter, Niall Best, who is standing on the dock, who's going to give us blow-by-blow perspective on this grudge match, this match race, all the way into the port. Now, you can see if you look a little bit past a little bit on the left-hand side of the mast of Dongfeng Race Team, that is the entrance to the port. Now, quite uniquely in what is the most brutal, the most isolated, the most savage ocean race in the world, we are going to be sailing into the downtown port of a massive metropolis like Aarhus here. So. This is totally unique, and as you can see, we've got an incredible turnout, lots of big, powerful ribs. We've got flying moths. We've got the Olympic class RSX windsurfers, sailing boats, kiteboards, all manner of watercraft are out here, and you can see that this race, the Volvo Ocean Race, has brought the city to life and is certainly inspiring all of the nautical community to come out and have a go. Now, Sally, you've been giving us great perspective on these sort of tight matches all the way around the world with the race starts and the import races. What can you tell us about the conditions that they're in, and who typically has an edge in these close sort of mano-a-mano combat situations?
Well, you know, it's no surprise we have the red boats at the front again. Dongfeng leading out of the gates and making some great tactical decisions upwind. Now, you know, they're just trying to navigate their way through these puffy and shifty conditions in around this mark, which is going to be a challenge. Mapfre has gained about a mile-ish in the last, 20, 30 minutes, because they've been able to take a little bit less headers, basically. They're navigating themselves around these shifts. They're all going to be looking for gains as they get inside this little corner, turn around, and head back out, and hopefully a lot of wind.
Yeah, now it's quite unique. It's almost like an upwind mark in an import race, but we're doing this in the middle of an offshore leg.
Yeah, exactly, and it's proving to be. We've seen some matching tacks in Dongfeng, but they also have to play the shifts because they're dealing with the winds up against these big buildings, which you can argue that we're closer to shore than we've ever been in any import race.
And being close to shore means that we are close to the audience, people that are normally watching the Volvo Ocean Race via their phones or the tracker or the website, but now they really have the opportunity to see this up close, live, and, well, almost in their bedrooms. And so to get an idea of the ambiance and how much the fans are enjoying this, we're going to go down live to Niall Best, who is on the dock in Aarhus, and he can tell us a little bit about what life is like in the city centre.
in via helicopter. We've been following the boats. We landed here about an hour and a half ago. We were in a bit of a rush to try and find the best spot to set up the camera. We needn't have worried. You can see just behind me, the turning mark in Aarhus Harbour is just there. And all the way along the harbour wall, stretching all the way back this way, every spot is a good vantage place. Everybody is lining the walls right here. We have got hundreds of people that way, thousands of people this way. It's going to be an enormous cheer when Vestas 11th Hour Racing comes into here, basically the home port, the home of Vestas Wind. One thing's for certain though, we knew that this harbour entrance was going to be difficult, and it is looking pretty tricky. It's going to be gusty, it's going to be shifty, and it's going to make a bit of a play for these boats to get round it safely.
The puffs and the shifty conditions, are there lots of big buildings? We're on a helicopter shot looking down into the harbour, but it's hard to see on this shot exactly where we're going to end up. But as you look around, are there lots of buildings that are going to be blocking the wind and giving crazy shift? What can we expect when we get into this central basin?
There are some buildings here. They're not the tallest buildings, but they're high enough to cause some disturbance in the breeze. We are tucked inside the inner harbour, and I'll try and sort of paint a little bit of a picture for you. They come in through a narrow entrance, then it widens up a little bit, and we've got an old industrial sort of complex behind us. Then on the side of the harbour where the city is, where the fans are right now, they sail along a harbour wall, then to the turning mark. That's in a little bit of space. There they've got a little bit of a chance to play the best of the breeze and the shifts. They come round that, and then when they exit, they're going to be right up against the wall again. So close, I could almost high-five the sailors as they go past. They're going to be deafened by the roar of the crowd as they go through, not least Vestas 11th Hour Racing. So they're going to have to keep their wits about them. Whether they're going to set the boat up for the lulls or for the gusts is going to be a little telling, but there is going to be some skill to get through here
now,
fast.
Sally, I'd just like to pick up on one of the things that Niall said there. The sailors are going to be deafened by the roar of the crowds, but certainly they're going to be challenged by the fluky conditions in the inner basin. One message that I saw coming in through the social networks was what happens to these boats in close quarters. Normally they're used to playing in a huge sandbox, but what are the rules that constrain the way that they can approach this in and out?
Well, first of all, with these boats, they're in an inshore race. Everybody's on deck and they're still short-handed. On the offshore, they track down to 4 or 5 sailors. Pretty soon, I think you're going to see everybody come on deck to maneuver the boat in these tight quarters. They have one turning mark in there. I don't think the boats are close enough to have an overlap, to have any room scenario. But they're basically going to tack around this mark, a right-hand turn, boat to starboard, and come back out. And that may be where we see a little port-starboard interaction between Mapfre and Dongfeng.
One boat going upwind and the other one already coming back down.
Exactly, yeah. And then you have the rule where it's windward boat keep clear. So basically, Dongfeng could be in the give way situation there, and it might be interesting to see if Mapfre, play the game a little bit, try to make Dongfeng to just sail a few extra meters would help at this point.
So the big question here is this just for fun, a bit of a giggle, or could this actually have some influence on the overall leg and thus on the overall race?
It can. I mean, we're talking right now, Mapfre only 0.4 of a nautical mile behind Dongfeng. So if they gain half that distance, they're like within an earshot of each other, and they're on the way to grinding them down. The same thing, if Dongfeng do this maneuver really well, they could gain that distance and have a little more legs on the way out of here.
So there you go, all to play for, and we have now got this great perspective here of the stern camera on board Dongfeng Racing. These are live shots as they approach the harbour wall, just up a little bit to the left-hand side of the image. Looks like we've got Charles Coudolier on the wheel, driving his team forward. We've got Pascal Bidigori a little bit forwards of him. So the navigator, obviously, Sally, on deck, keeping a pretty sharp eye on ley lines, particularly for this tricky moment.
For sure, and we don't want, they don't want to make any extra meters of sailing through, so they do have to do another tack, I presume, to get in to this little basin and around the mark, so they don't want to, basically waste any time or any distance here. So they'll be checking the charts, calling these ley lines just like they would on a high-pressured import race.
Now we'll just have a little squiz at the telemetry here. Both boats are completely fully on the wind, and indeed they are tacking. But the conditions look quite shifty, and indeed the mainsail of Mapfre looks quite open. Sally, can you sort of talk us through the way that you've seen these different teams trim the boats? Does one boat do it differently? Is it totally condition dependent, or does everybody have their own interpretation from what you've seen during the course of the race?
You know, some of it is condition dependent for sure. I think right now we see a nice, deep, powerful jib on Mapfre and an open mainsail. It's quite forgiving setup. In my general opinion, I think that Dongfeng and Mapfre set up quite similar, with a tighter main compared to the rest of the fleet and a more open jib. It is more forgiving to drive, and they can find the mode a bit easier. When you trim the jib on really tight, it can be too much power and too fine of a groove to actually sail to the shifty conditions. So I think that's what we're seeing right now. And at Mapfre, I think our setup for the pressure as it comes in, if a big puff comes and the boat wipes out, you don't actually gain any momentum forward. You just wipe out and go sideways. And you can see Dongfeng now putting the bow down, really going fast, gaining some distance on Mapfre.
Now you've watched every second of the import and the starts, these critical moments, just like this. Often we don't have Xabi Fernandez on the helm, although it looks like he is there now. Can you sort of talk us through your read of these two teams? Often we see Charles on the wheel, but less frequently Xabi. This is obviously reflective of their different take on how to lead the team.
Exactly. I think we've seen Xabi lead from the middle there. Normally he's on the pit, but that doesn't take anything away from his skills as a driver. And as soon as they get offshore, they have a stack full of strong drivers on Mapfre, and they're just using them right now. And having Xabi on the wheel now instead of Pablo Arate, you know, it's not much of a difference. Pablo obviously has done all the import racing, and they won that hands down, almost with the whole, you know, import to spare. But it just shows the depth of the team here. And, you know, if I wouldn't be surprised that Charles is on the wheel of Dongfeng, and, you know, that easily for them to fall into their roles on board is what's happening right now. So each team is trying to use the strength of every sailor to basically deal with this puffy and shifty conditions.
Now, can I ask, have you sailed on this area here in Aarhus? Because I know that it's a critical space. We'll be talking, I hope, with Jenna Mai Hansen a little bit later, because this Aarhus is the base of high-performance Olympic sailing for Denmark. But one of the interesting things that we can see here is obviously you've got a lot of shifty wind, but also incredibly flat seas, because we've essentially sailed up into a cul-de-sac. So there's no fetch, very, very flat waters, and this is great for this close boat-on-boat action, because you don't have the waves to slow you down.
For sure. I haven't had the pleasure of racing on these waters yet, but you know, with the combined worlds coming for the Olympic classes in a few weeks or less than a month, you know, it's quite. It looks like a fantastic venue where you don't have to deal with the big waves and big swell, and it really is a true testament to the detailed skills of a sailor to read the wind, to put the boat in the right place, and to change gears is what we're also seeing out there right now. Trying to deal with the shifts. That was a quick tack from Mapfre. They didn't even, you know, change the stack over. They just went for a tack and split the stack a little bit, knowing they have a few tacks in, and if they take a few lifted angles, they're going to gain a bit on the leaders.
So here, certainly in my estimation, and I think also in yours, it's better to split the stack and not be optimized on either tack. But what you do gain is the ability to spin the boat like we just saw and do these super efficient, very fast tacks so that you can play the shifts really well.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, one thing, this is back in SCA, and I know things have really developed since then, but we had sort of a 2 to 5 minute call in our mind, because if we were going to stack, we needed to be sailing more than 5 minutes on a tack to make it worthwhile. And, you know, they might be down to a lower number there to make sure that to use the actual maximum ballast of the boat for a short amount of time. But right now they're just doing 30-second minutes on each tack to you know, take advantage of the best shift they can. The ballast, I mean, if you move the people over, it's quite, you know, if you get everybody in the right place on the boat, it can equal out the ballast of the sails.
Now, you've sailed a couple of legs on this edition with Team Brunel, but also with SCA. Can you sort of talk to us through you know, what is the mind of the sailor right now on the short leg? That it's absolutely nose to the grindstone. You want to be up on deck. You want to be adding right in moment in almost sailing it like a fast net race where you're sleeping on the rail. But then you need to balance that with not burning through the sailors too quickly. and saving something for the end. Can you sort of talk us through this dynamic?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you follow any of the raw content, which has been really, really great online right now, is that you see one theme, and it's the sailors have had between 3 minutes and less than an hour of sleep. I think everybody out there. So what's going through their mind right now, they've been, just about 24 hours, or a bit more, working hard and continually. So the mind is getting fuzzy. When the mind gets fuzzy, the coordination gets a little bit hard. You move a little bit slower. Your muscles don't work as well. And that's what they're going to be doing. I would assume as soon as they round this mark, they're going to be pacing everybody out. Maybe still a watch on standby, but trying to make sure they eat something, make sure they close their eyes for at least an hour to kind of rejuvenate themselves. But this is arguably harder than a long distance offshore leg, because you're never going to get into a rhythm of finding yourself, of actually being able to sleep and feeling rested. There's really no rest from now to the finish. No long-term rest for sure. They're going to be maneuvering all the way, and you're going to see the eyes of the sailors getting heavier and heavier and heavier.
And certainly I hope that they can hang on and stay safe, but also stay in a high-performance groove all the way to the end. Really, really tough for the skippers to know how hard to drive their teams and how hard to drive themselves, because obviously there's a lot of pride on the line. This is an opportunity for each boat to win the race overall on this leg. But that's all to come. Now we are sailing into the outer harbour here in Aarhus. We are lining up to go past the first lighthouse and then into the inner basin. We've got a great spectator fleet that has been really respectful, that is remaining outside of the channel for the moment. Now, Niall, if you can hear me, I'd just like to ask you, the boats are now entering the outside breakwater. Can you see them coming, and has there been a stir in the crowd with the boat's imminent arrival?
Yeah, that's an understatement. Around about 5-10 minutes ago, everybody started to take a step forward towards the water's edge because the first person got the sight of Dongfeng Race Team coming around the corner. Now we can see Dongfeng Race Team and Mapfre. They are extremely close, as I'm sure you've already seen by the helicopter. And as you say, Charles Quadrelia is now entering the harbour. One thing to point out here, Conrad, is at the moment, Dongfeng Race Team look like they are laying this turning mark. It's going to be a starboard turn, a right-hand round. They just put the bows down now, and how much the breeze flicks around as it's doing there. The big gust comes down, they start to ride that pressure a little bit higher. This is going to be really telling. If they can lay that turning mark, then a lot of the challenges that I think the sailors were worried about coming into the harbour here in Aarhus go away. But just as I'm standing here on the wall, there's some big gusts rolling down, so we're going to have to keep a very close eye on this boat over the next 30 seconds.
Yeah, it certainly looks like a tricky approach, and as the helicopter zooms out and we see the approach into the inner harbour, we get some sense of just what is waiting for the boats. Obviously, Niall will pass back to you soon to get the blow-by-blow of the actual turn. But on the shot here, Sally, we can see 0.4 of a mile separates the boats. But really, once you get in close and personal, that looks a lot more distance than it does when you're out at sea. If they were out in the middle of the ocean, we would say they were right next door to each other. But really, this is starting to stretch out into a big lead.
A big lead, yeah. I don't know who would agree with that more.
Yeah.
I think Dongfeng would love it to look like a big lead. You're right. I mean, if you're looking about a short course, this is, in an import race, they're ahead by half a leg. On an offshore course, they're ahead by a breath of air, right?
Yeah.
A fraction. So you're right, but I think what we're going to see, well, it'd be interesting to see the gains and losses that are made through this little dog leg, into the downtown area, and then I think the sailors are just kind of wishing to get out of here smoothly, cleanly, not make any little extra distances or extra mistakes with a sail trim, and turn the corner and get off and running again.
Now, looking at the conditions, we can see that they've got a new sail hoisted, and what are your thoughts as to what that might be? It looks like they're going to be on a broad reach on the way out. Do you think they've gone directly to the masthead zero or the J0 to add some flexibility? What's your take?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough call. To me, right now, furled up, the way that the branding looks at the bottom there, it almost looks like the J0, but I wouldn't be surprised if, I wouldn't be surprised if the J0. The only problem with the J0 is that it's not the easiest sail change to the masthead zero, which they will definitely need to get on out of here.
Yeah. Okay. Well. There we go. We've got a conservative option, and we've got a more powerful option. Now we've got the perspective of Dongfeng Race Team through the eyes of our camera and Niall Mapfre Best down on the dock. Niall, tell us what this is like.
Well, right now we've got Dongfeng Race Team just, one boat length away from the harbour wall. They've played the right game. You're right about them being conservative. They've made this pretty easily. They've sailed into the harbour. They're approaching the tack. We can see that the stack of weight is already split, and the crowds all around have been cheering and welcoming them in. We've got the race control marshal boats out, making sure that their passage is pretty smooth apart from the breeze, and they've just hit a very big gust at the moment. Remember, they don't have the stack all the way up. The keel, I think, is already starting to move. That's why we're seeing some heel coming onto the boat. Now the tack for the turn. And this is going to be important. If they get hit by a big gust at this point, it's going to make the bear away a little bit challenging. But so far, so good. They're under control and they're through the turn. And now they're pointing on the way back out. There's a gust coming over their shoulder, but Dongfeng Racing will be very pleased by that. Smoothly on the way in, smoothly around the turning mark. Now the big zero sail comes out. They're going to be back up to full power. They've made that look very easy.
So there we go. They've unfurled the masthead code 0, the biggest sail that they could use in these conditions, and they've already got the jockey pole out. Looks like they're ready to attack now.
Yeah, absolutely ready. And what they're going to be doing in the next 20 seconds or so is they're going to be sailing right past Mapfre. The Chinese boat is right now locked bow to bow with Mapfre. Now, you were talking a little bit about the rules. At the moment, Dongfeng Race Team on port tack. Mapfre coming up on starboard. Mapfre are going to have right of way. There's plenty of room to avoid each other. I'm sure that Xavi Fernandez will be looking just to get in, get round the mark and get out without any aggressive tactics. But in a minute, they will be locking horns. So far, so good for Dongfeng Race Team. Can Mapfre match them? Are they going to be able to sail a smooth line in, round, and then back out and keep the race alive for the next big half of this leg?
So here they go. This is the moment that they're facing each other down. Do you feel the energy of the crowd with these two champions staring each other down?
Well, right now, every single person on the harbour wall is standing up, Conrad. They're all taking a look out. One person stands up, blocks the way for somebody else. Everybody's trying to find a vantage point. But what I can tell you from the corner where I can see is Dongfeng Race Team, it looks like they've held high. They weren't prepared. They weren't happy to get close to Mapfre and give them any chance to get a call of them. So they've gone right over the top, kept well clear. Mapfre are now coming up. At the moment, their line looks a little bit lower to Dongfeng Race Teams when they came in. So Mapfre will want to stay a little bit harder on the breeze. But what I can tell you by my eye at the moment is that the Spanish boat is matching what we saw Dongfeng Race Team do in terms of sail setup. Good conservative
Well, it'll be interesting
thinking.
to see, Niall, what sail they do finally unfurl when they go around the mark. I don't see a jockey pole set up for the new tack. So it's going to be interesting to see, because earlier in the day we saw Dongfeng Race Team going downwind with the masthead code 0, the sail that they just unfurled, whereas in the same conditions, this boat here, Team Mapfre, was on the J0 and matching them, although saying a little bit higher. So interesting to see different takes on how to attack the same conditions here now.
Yeah, really good call about the jockey pole. I was seeing a little bit of movement on that back corner, but I was also mentioning that they are lower. They are way closer to the other side of the harbour right now. They got a little bit of a gust, which allowed them to burn the power off with a little bit of height. So they're going to be able to lay this mark without needing to do any strapping in of sails or any tacks. That's going to be good news, Xavi Fernandez. But a big header just in the last 2 or 3 seconds. The J1, a big luff, they lost power, the stack is split, they're ready for this tack. So far, I'd say that Dongfeng Race Teams were smoother. I mean, we're talking about boat lengths here, but that's how close this boat race is right now. Dongfeng Race Team, they've had the edge on this approach to Aarhus Harbour turning mark. Mapfre now turning round. There is a gust coming over their side, but they're safely through. The bows round now. They're ready for the power. And again, straight away with the unfurl of the big sail up front. As you say, no jockey pole ready for it right now, but the crew are already getting the J1 out and safely packed away. A good turn into the harbour, a good way round the turning mark, but I would say Dongfeng Race Team probably pulled out a couple of boat lengths there.
So it sounds like it was it didn't quite go as smoothly for Mapfre as Dongfeng. Again, talk about the audience, the people around you at the moment. Do you feel like they favour one boat over the other, or is the home crowd just waiting for Vestas 11th Hour Racing at this point?
Oh, I think they're just waiting for Vestas 11th Hour Racing. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've had cheers, we've had claps, but I think they are saving their energy for the local boat, absolutely, for sure. One thing to note right now is that Mapfre is sailing away with a lot more pressure than Dongfeng Race Team had as they exited this turning mark. So maybe the approach gave some advantage to Dongfeng Race Team. Now the exit seems to be giving the advantage to Mapfre. They have got plenty of power at the moment. They are certainly not sailing any extra distance. They seem to be laying the exit, the leeward end of the opening here from the harbour. They're going to be just turning on it. So maybe they pulled back a little bit of that distance. Looking over to the horizon, I'm trying to look out for Vestas 11th Hour Racing and when they are going to approach. And I'm sure then, Conrad, we're going to see some even bigger cheers from the crowd. Because one thing's for certain, we can hear the sailors as they go past. We are right in the thick of it.
Well, it's certainly not every day that we get to hear the sailors from the shore grunting and grinding away. And just to confirm for the TV audience watching this at home, that was the same sail that the Dongfeng Race Team deployed as well. And then later, they went to the jockey pole. And so more of a sort of intermediary change. I'll ask you about that shortly, Sally, but this is the situation now as we're zoomed into the outer harbour of Aarhus. We can see Dongfeng Race Team coming out. Their lead is intact, but once they finally make it around the corner, it's going to be interesting to see the comparison, whether they won or lost with that little zip-zap into the central city. But now it's all eyes on Vestas 11th Hour Racing, still sailing upwind towards Aarhus. Now, this is the local boat. It is sponsored by 11th Hour Racing and Vestas as well. Now, Vestas is obviously a Danish company. It's the biggest wind turbine manufacturer in the world. And Sally, it's almost unfair because this team has had 2 homecomings during the course of this race.
That's right. You know, they came into Newport, what a hometown crowd, and with a lot of love for their team there. And now they get not only a flyby, but a pretty cool close flyby right down to the downtown scene in Aarhus.
And so we can see, before we get our helicopter shot coming back, Dongfeng Race Team there in shot is going 3 to 4 knots faster than Mapfre at the moment. So clearly Mapfre is still suffering a little bit in the disturbed wind from the city centre. Keep an eye on the fast ferry, a little bit out of shot there, but it'll be coming back with the helicopter. We've got a massive car ferry that goes backwards and forwards in the Baltic region. And but one thing is great is we've got the Dutch here, the Dutch and the Brazilians, there we go, representing with their Olympic RSX windsurfers and clearly trying to show Dongfeng what's up, because they can blast along in these light conditions as well. So a nice little jibe there from Dongfeng. They telegraphed that jibe by furling up their J2, the staysail, to get it clean air onto the masthead code 0, and then slowly luffing up and getting more speed. But Sally, it seemed like it was a pretty nice jibe, but out here with so much room to play with, doesn't look like there's going to be a problem with Vestas versus Dongfeng, as we had anticipated potentially with Mapfre.
Yeah, that's right. I think Dongfeng are going to be, quite clear here. They're going to be able to pick and choose their jibing points. The same thing they're doing on the way out as they did on the way in, which is picking the shift and the puffs. So in the puffs, they're going to be able to run down with it, as we say, so press against it. And in the light spots, they have to come up a little bit to keep the boat speed up. They're also going to be looking for these angles, and you can see there they are bearing away and just gaining distance away from Mapfre, which is quite nice. Vestas tacking on the bow there might line up a little bit of another port starboard, but I'm pretty sure there's enough open water here for them to sail clear, have a nice little wave, and a good luck for the next turn for these guys, and see how it all pans out after Vestas gets around this short mark inside the harbor.
Now, with these boats sailing downwind VMG angles in these light conditions, what angle do we expect them to be jibing through? Does that almost compare to the same angles that Vestas will be sailing upwind?
A little bit. That'll also be a lot wider. They're sailing like between 135 and 140 true downwind, and Vestas is right now going straight upwind, and they might have to crack off a little bit to get into the harbor, sailing about 45, 46 true. They'd press a little bit to 48 just to keep the boat really moving forward in the lulls. You're apparent wind sailing, so it's all about chasing the wind and making sure that the boat keeps going fast through the water. And you can see Dongfeng plowing through the water right there quite nicely.
Certainly doing nicely, and it's beautiful to see the contrast of the old boat out there in shot. Certainly a very different era from where we are now with our carbon fiber Formula One offshore racing beasts. But interesting to see there, Sally, that you were talking about chasing the apparent wind. And so those of you that are watching at home, I certainly invite you to watch on the tracker and also in the shot from a helicopter to see the little squiggles in the wake. So that's not a poor driver at the helm. On the contrary, it's somebody who is totally tuned into what's happening with the boat, and as it slows down, you bear away in order to build the speed again. And so, Sally, you've got a lot of experience in driving these boats. Can you tell us a little bit about their peculiarities? Does it really feel good? Are these nice boats to drive, or are they sort of heavy trucks?
It's quite interesting because we had the opportunity to sail the old Volvo 70s with SCA as a training boat, and the difference, it was quite an easy comparison between the two boats. The old Volvo 70s is like driving a big truck. You put it at the angle and it goes and it keeps accelerating until sometimes you want it to stop accelerating and you want it to slow down a bit. These boats are a little bit more tender, I would say. You have to work them a bit. You always see the crew trimming and driving, as you say, towards the angle of the wind. They're basically, you could argue that there's maybe not enough weight in the keel, so it's quite a fanatical, like finesse boat where you need to keep it on its feet, keep trimming and driving it to keep it going. And I think that's the biggest difference we've seen in this race compared to the last, is the ability of the crews to keep it on its feet in its correct mode for a longer period of time.
Now, we're just trying to connect to our Danish sailor in the race, the sailor on the back of the boat here, Jenna Mai Hansen. We're not quite sure whether we can connect at the moment or whether she can hear us. Eventually she'll give us a thumbs up that we can see on this shot. But in the meantime, we've got Charlie Enright on the wheel, and I was just wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about driving these boats and how much of a difference can a good helm versus a bad helm make in the course of a day?
Yeah, it can make a big difference in this design in the course of minutes or an hour, to be honest. You're really focused on your percentages, which is based on the polar performance of the boat. So you're pushing the boat, 1% here or there, and if you can keep it consistently at those high numbers, you're going to be gaining in the fleet. And the trick is how many drivers do you have that keep it consistent over 24 hours, let alone these next 72 hours, and on the longer legs, that's the difference we really see in the 20-day legs.
And so you talk about the fact that these boats are quite tender. We're seeing Vestas 7th Hour Racing really powered up in this gust. The windward rudder came out, and we saw that the crew had to really dump that main sheet in order to get the boat to stand up again. These boats are very sensitive to heel and the way that they move through the water. Obviously, you've got an instrument that tells you exactly what your target should be. Can you tell us a little bit about how you sail a boat to heel angle, because that's something that most sailors don't do, And do you ever look over your shoulder to see how much rudder is left in the water?
Well, you can kind of feel it. The boats do sail at quite a high heel angle. That's one thing we did. I think all the boats realize now that 30, 35 degrees of heel isn't necessarily super slow on these boats. It's about having it being a consistent heel angle. They have one thing that really does control the heel angle is the traveler trimmer. So, here's the interaction between Dongfeng and Vestas. Vestas on port, Dongfeng on starboard. They're going to keep clear. But what a nice little chance they can. A little bit of bad air going to come here from Vestas, and then they're going to pop through, and we'll see if we see any hands waving and well wishes. Probably not. It looks like they're all hammered down.
they're trying to fight to the death. And just in terms of the closing speed, we've got the telemetry here, and so we've seen Dongfeng going 16 knots. And then we've got Vestas sort of doing 9.5 to 10, which is a pretty good target number upwind, right?
Yeah, it is a pretty good target number. If they want to go a little bit faster forward, 11.3s would be, their upwind angle, but they're really trying to get right up to this harbor, so they're trying to sail high.
Sounds good. And so it looks like we're a little bit, not quite on the same line with Mapfre. It's not going to be as close across. But I'm getting notice now that perhaps Jenna, my Hansen is able to hear us, and so Jenna, can you give us a thumbs up and say hello? You are live on Facebook. Fantastic. We can see that you've got the connection now. Now, Jenna, talk us through this moment. How proud are you to be on a Dutch boat with a Dutch sponsor? A Danish boat with sailing into Denmark. How exciting is this for you?
It's an amazing moment. Everybody seems so happy, and I'm obviously super happy to be home.
Now, Jenna, you say that this is home. Aarhus is the center for the Olympic sailing in Denmark. So this must be a second home for you. It is truly a homecoming for you.
Sorry, you're breaking up a bit. Can you try that again?
Sure, no problem. I was just saying it must be extra special knowing that you're sailing into Aarhus, which is, first off, look behind you because there's Mapfre coming for you. But I just wanted to say this must be incredibly exciting sailing into Aarhus, which is the center of Olympic sailing for Denmark.
Yes, Aarhus is the new center of Olympic sailing. We just got here. We're going to have the Olympic qualifier next month or in August, which I'm also going to attend to straight after this race. So obviously it's a big sailing community and a big sailing center, and I think everybody's just so proud that actually the Volvo Ocean Race is coming by here. And hi to Mapfre!
So hi to Mapfre. They just went in behind you. Talk us through that moment. That was a pretty tight cross. What does it feel like to be in such close contact after a day at sea?
Everything you say, but yes, it's obviously super tight here, super tight going into the harbor, and we're crossing each other even though we sail hundreds of miles, and we can still cross each other. So it's so exciting. It means that everything's up and no one's won. This Volvo Ocean Race, yes, we are still trying to see if we can win this leg. The guys are right here, not that far in front of us, so it's going to be a tight match, and everything is obviously full on for the three boats that can still win this race. So it's super exciting, and good luck to everybody.
Clearly, you're still chasing the leg win. I'm sure that your skipper, Charlie Enright, wants to make it a tradition of winning the last leg of the Volvo Ocean Race. Tell us what the last 24 hours were like. How hard have you been pushing, and have you slept at all?
No. Sorry guys, I can't really hear you anymore.
Okay, no problem, Yena. It sounds like you've got your hands full. You've got a attack coming up going into Aarhus. I hope you really enjoy this experience, and we'll try talking to you later. So.
All right, perfect. Thank you guys.
So, Mai Hansen there, clearly the local lass, the favorite of Aarhus, and Sally, I just wanted to sort of pick up on something that she said there, that obviously she's known for getting the bronze medal in the Rio Olympics in the 49er FX, so the women's version of the 49er skiff. But it sounds like she's got a really busy schedule if she's going to be back here in a couple of weeks competing in the Olympic qualifiers.
I think so, and I think she's spending a little bit of her off time preparing for that, and connecting with her crew and saying, okay, look, our focus is still the Olympics, and we can squeeze this in, and no downtime for this newly acquired Volvo Ocean Race sailor. She's going to jump right back in her FX and try to qualify the country in August, right on these waters here. So interesting if she's going to take some notes coming in.
Now, they are the reigning champions in the 49er FX as well. They were able, in fact, to beat Martine Grail in the last World Championships. And indeed, Mai Hansen's teammate, Katja, has been working in the M32 program that you run. Have you sort of got to know her a little bit as well? And how interesting is it to have two members of a two-person team in the same team, but in very different roles?
Yeah, I think it's nice to see the development of them as sailors, but also in a mix, the Volvo. And I think we saw Katja do a nice leap off of the back of Vestas out of one, I forget which leg it was, but it was nice to see their connection in this race. And to me, it's quite an impressive thing to say, hey, look, I'm going to go do the Volvo. I just won a medal in the Olympics, but I'm not going to give up my dream on winning a gold medal in the Olympics. And here we go. Let's keep planning and keep our campaign going. And as soon as I'm done with this Volvo Ocean Race, we're going to jump back in together and qualify the country and not alone win a world championship in the middle of this race. So the talent is no surprise that she's able to hang with these guys on the back of this boat.
Now, sadly, I didn't get to have a chat with her about what it's like to step onto a Volvo Ocean racing boat, which is essentially a big skiff, after having clearly done so well in the smaller boats. But can you talk to us a little bit about the transferable skills?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk personally, it was a long time for me to transfer the skills, really, because it is a big skiff, but the way the team works inside this boat is quite different than any sort of Olympic class boat. You have these very large winches that you can't get your fingers stuck in, and when you're not used to it, it takes a little bit of technique to learn. You have all the pedestals working together. You have to be really coordinated, sails up on locks and tacks down. So this kind of stuff you don't actually have on an Olympic class boat, let alone driving a big sled offshore. I think on the skiffs, the driving skills probably do transfer a little bit, but I came from match racing and yingling sailing, which is quite slow Olympic class boats, and it took a long time to transfer. But the bottom line is that sailors are sailors, and when they're out there reading the wind and finding modes and finding sail trim and thinking about how to get through a course, no matter how long the course is, they're thinking about the same things, and that's where for sure a lot of these Olympic sailors, match racers, skiff sailors, whatever, they can transfer into these Volvo 65s.
Yeah, certainly a challenge, because there are so many different ways that you can participate in the sport of sailing, and the basics transfer. But as you say, there are so many skills and methods of doing a particular mover that are so boat or class or team specific, that there's certainly a big learning curve wherever you go in the sport, and that's one of the things that makes it so exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing that I remember really learning was just how do you manage yourself out there for, more than 24 hours. These Olympic sailors are used to being out there for, 8 hours max. That's a total max, maybe 4 or 5 hours in full race mode, and then coming in and having a nice shower and a hot meal and doing it all over again the next day, and having the luxury of going to the gym and keeping your body loose. And when you're offshore, you don't have the luxury. You get quite stiff. You sleep in these bunks, that aren't very comfortable. You're obviously not eating the food that you want to eat. And it's hard to pace yourself. I remember going hard for 2.5 days and then having a burnout and then having to recover from the burnout, but you're still racing offshore. So It's a mental balance that they're trying to find. But what is it? What's a neat thing? If you do go back to Olympic sailing or short course racing, you're all the better for it. You're much stronger, and you know yourself a lot better.
Now, clearly, so it's a mental game as well. It's not just physical, and is it? Do you find in terms of transferable skills that going back from offshore racing to inshore racing, you've still got that sort of technical acuity of the feeling, but now you're just tougher in the head and you can go harder.
Yeah, I think exactly. I think you gain, the balance gets a bit shifted to being a stronger sailor, no matter what experience you encounter. And if you have a chance to get on a Volvo boat, let alone go around the world, you add that experience to your game. I went into the M32 match racing, and yeah, it was 100% physical boats. The teams were wiped out, but what you had to do was, while being completely physically broken, you had to really think quite fast on your feet because the boats are going so fast through the water and the maneuvers are coming up so quickly. So that was what I jumped into after Volvo, and it was for sure a benefit after going around the world.
So a big diversity of the tasks that you're required to do, from peels in the middle of the ocean in the middle of 40-knot squalls to what we're seeing now. So certainly plenty on your plate. But first, just while we're waiting for Vestas 7th Hour Racing to make it into their home crowd and get appropriate congratulations from their home fans, let's have a look at how they got there and look at the last 24 hours on the virtual eye tracker to look at how this boat got into third place. So we're out of Gothenburg and sailing upwind, and much in the same way that we saw Dongfeng Racing playing the shifts in the Bay of Aarhus, here they're playing the shifts as well.
They are, and they saw some unexpected or quicker transitions through this leg, this upwind beat, than anybody expected. And they're just trying to basically keep the boats going upwind, but also sailing the closest tack to the mark while covering Mapfre. There you see Dongfeng really thinking about Mapfre, but also staying a bit ahead and a bit to windward.
But most remarkably is that we saw Mapfre back fighting for the lead, whereas just a few hours before they had been way out the back. And that's just an issue of playing the shifts really well. We saw Vestas 7th Hour Racing doing a pretty expensive tack that saw them doing a lot more miles. And then this bit here on the approach to Denmark, we not quite zoomed in enough to see the detail, but we saw in the helicopter images that we put up online just a few hours ago, two boats sailing in the same conditions but with very different setups. That we saw Dongfeng Racing with the masthead code 0 and the J3 as the staysail, and then just tucked in behind them we saw Mapfre with the J0, the J2 and the J3 with this beautiful triple header setup. And so Sally, this is the second time that these boats have gone around the world. They have done countless hours of testing. How is it possible that two boats in the same condition have such different setups?
Well, it's completely possible because they're just pushing as hard as they can, so they're trying to find their edge. But to me, it was a funny, not maybe a coincidence, but normally we see Mapfre sailing a lower, faster angle, and Dongfeng maybe on a smaller setup, sailing a bit higher, and basically making the covering of the ground. So it was like they had looked at each other's playbook the last couple weeks and said, okay, let's make sure we can match this mode. And they were trying to match each other's modes and coming out with their own modes. So that's the game when you think about how these teams are trying to push. There's a lot of people in the background watching video, watching setups, and that's the talent of the sailors, that they can just replicate what they want on the water without extra training.
Now, I'd just like to sort of burrow in a little bit more on what you just said about that. You've done 2 legs on Brunel in this edition of the race. You did most of the SCA one. How is the role like you, the person on board on land that's involved in the team? Are you doing espionage? Are you sort of logging what the other boats are doing? Is this part of your role, or is there somebody in the team that's doing that?
Yeah, for sure. I'm no longer that connected with Brunel. I just jumped in for those 2 legs. But when we were off a leg on SCA, you were just glued to the tracker, glued to any of the footage, any of the live feed, because You were looking for, yeah, I mean, you could see sail trim and where the marks are on the up downs of the jibs and how the poles are placed and sail shape and things like that. And now we have some amazing drone footage. So anybody who's off a leg but still part of a team, as a sailor, they're picking up on all these details. And then every team has their contingency behind them that's actually studying it, recording and logging some of the data. That's combined with, as soon as the boat comes ashore, all the data, all the actual live data from the boat that's been logged about who is driving and trimming and what sail combination they had up is connected with all that, and that's how they make their game plan for the next leg. So they combine that with the weather, and they say, okay, this is the most likely scenario, and then they say, okay, we were really good at this angle or not, and then if they weren't, they don't feel like they were up to speed on it, they're going to go back and fully research about things they might want to change. And I think that might have been what we saw on that downwind leg, and I think pretty impressive that Dongfeng, in hindsight, was able to hold off Mapfre on a VMG run, as we've seen them get past before.
And so clearly, out of all of the people that are watching minute by minute, hour by hour, these last 9 months and the last 45,000 miles around the world, it seems like out of all the fans, the real super fans are actually the teams themselves in terms of all the work that they're doing here. But speaking of fans, we are now approaching the inner sanctum again, but this time with the home favorite. Vestas, 11th Hour Racing, finally closing into their second of 2 home ports in this edition of the Volvo Ocean Race. And this is going to be a pretty special moment for the entire team, but certainly for Jenna Mai Hansen. Now, it's going to be pretty cool to see her back on these waters in just a couple of weeks, but right now it is all about this moment right here. And Niall, if you're listening, I'd like to hear your perspective. You've got the blue boat on the horizon. They're coming in past the breakwater. Again, are you seeing the surge in the fans now that the local boat is arriving? Okay, well, sorry, it sounds like we've got a little bit of a technical problem there with Niall, but as we go on board with Vestas 11th Hour Racing, I'd just like to highlight one thing that's quite interesting here, and that is that we've got somebody who's not in full team kit at the back of the boat. Now, Sally, I think you know who that is. Can you tell us a little bit about who that mystery man is on the back of the boat that we haven't seen yet during the course of this race?
I think the mystery man is Roy Disney Jr., and he probably has Disney on the back of his jacket there, underneath that extra layer. As we just heard Niall say, the sun has gone down, and it's got a little bit colder there, and they all have their warm beanies on as well. But this leg is quite unique. You're able to take one extra sponsor or affiliated person with the boat and give them the true experience of really what racing these boats are all about.
That's super cool. So we've got Roy Disney, who is a benefactor of sailing in America, who actually launched the career of Mark, Charlie, and I think Nick Dana was also part of the Morning Light program as well. So clearly they've got lots to thank this man for. And as you say, one of the things that's unique about this leg is the fact that you can have other members or sponsors on board. We've got Paolo Murpuri, who is the benefactor behind Turn the Tide on Plastic. He is currently on board that boat, and I've seen him on the pumps grinding away furiously as well. And then also on Sung Kai Scallywag, we've got Mr. Lee, I think he's the owner and the chairman of the company Sung Kai. He is on board right now. And I believe that he was on the wheel when the boats started in Gothenburg. And Sally, that was certainly a great start for that team, wasn't it?
That was. You could argue that maybe they should have had someone else jump off the back, but it was really cool because it was a first place start for sure for Sunghai Scallywag, and to see Mr. Lee just pumping away at the wheel there, pushing the team, and being second at the first turning mark was incredible. I think a high he'll never forget for sure.
Yeah, that was super cool. Great to see that team doing well. But right now, the power is on this team right here. Niall, we've got the team in the harbour. What's it like?
Well, it's pretty gusty. The breeze has increased since the last two boats came in and exited the harbour. Vestas 11th Hour Racing have got a little bit more to do. They're safely past the car ferry, which is now docked and out of the way. So they're coming up to the turning mark. But 1 minute, they've got too much power. Now, as they get close to where we are right now, and the clapping and the cheering from the crowd starts to come over the microphone, they get too little power. It's going to be very delicate for them to sail the best efficient line in. As we looking at them right now, we can see that leeward daggerboard halfway down at the moment. We have got the forward sail, the code 0 furled up, that's ready to go, and we've got the J1 being used at the moment. So again, same setup. This time the jockey pole is out and ready to be deployed. Behind us here at the moment, the Vestas Wind enclosure, the VIP Vestas Wind enclosure, is absolutely ready to cheer this boat round the mark. And here they are, bows to it now, just as the boat starts to heel over, the keel starts to go down, they turn their way through, looking out for any gusts on the horizon. There is some big breeze with us at the moment. The boat now up to power. They've got to get the bow through the turn nice and easily. And well, at this point, we did see Mapfre, we did see Dongfeng Racing with the code 0 already unfurling, but at the moment there's a little bit of delay. They're not going for it straight away. It could be because the breeze being a little bit higher means that they're not in a massive rush. We've got the bow on board Vestas 11th Hour Racing, the bow crew, just flicking the sheets off the daggerboard. They can deploy now if they want to, but they're taking their time just to wave to the crowds right now. And we've got a J3, it looks like, going up inside the J1. So, similar approach on the way in to Dongfeng Race Team and Mapfre, but a very different approach to the exit.
Different approach you're talking about with the sails there. Clearly this team, they're at home, they're getting a royal welcome. It's great to see Mai Hansen there waving to the crowds and really enjoying this moment to be home in Denmark before scooting off again to the Netherlands. But what do you see in the way that these three boats have gone through that maneuver? Clearly, everybody's taking it seriously. This is not for laughs. Everybody's taking it seriously.
I think exactly that. You were mentioning conservative sailing beforehand. There's been no dramas here at all. And so you start to think, well, you could have pushed it a little bit more. Maybe you could have come into the harbour on the bigger sail. But I would say the reason that we've seen no dramas is because these sailors have taken it pretty conservatively and very sensibly. They are still racing. No tricks have been played onto them by the breeze. They've been able to lay that turning mark and lay the harbour exit on the way out. So it was always going to be a little bit of an unknown coming into the harbour, a real treat for the city of Aarhus and a real treat for the fans that have come down here, and they really have come out here in droves. But there has been no problem with the speed of the boats. They've come safely in, safely out. The top three are now continuing out onto the open waters, and they're going to continue to push all the way to The Hague. We still got 4 boats to come. The crowds are still here, ready to welcome them in. But as you say, Vestas 11th Hour Racing, the local boat, I'm sure they're going to have the biggest cheer today.
And just before we sign off with your inside perspective, look around you from left to right. How many Vestas 11th Hour Racing jackets, T-shirts, hats are you seeing?
Well, just to my left at the moment, there is the Vestas Wind enclosure, and that's actually 3 floors of a building. There's a lower balcony, an upper balcony. The top balcony, it was full, absolutely rammed of fans as soon as we saw Vestas 11th Hour Racing on the horizon. It's still that way right now. You can tell that Aarhus is here for one boat. They are absolutely ready to welcome in the entire fleet, but Vestas 11th Hour Racing is understandably the boat that is
there we
really
go, the local boat
heart.
unfurling their big masthead code 0, and finally, as they are out of the inner part of the harbour, they can bear away a little bit. The angle was not quite the same as with the other boats. They had to stay on the J1 a little bit longer because it was more of a reach in and a reach out rather than upwind, downwind affair. But just like to draw your attention again to the local on the boat, Mai Hansen. We saw her standing on the aft corner of the boat and waving with abundant enthusiasm. We heard that potentially her parents were going to be on a balcony, sipping champagne, watching their daughter come in and out. So clearly a pretty special moment. in my life, I've had the opportunity to sail into my home port and actually to win a race. And there's nothing more special that warms the cockles of your heart than sailing home and putting on a bit of a show for your friends and family. So great opportunity there, but now the show is over, it's back to the race, and it's going to be absolutely nose to the grindstone as the big masthead Code Zero flings the boat back out of the harbour and onto the challenging pursuit of the two red boats ahead of them. So masthead Code Zero is out. The J1 is going down. Remember, this is the sail that Niall and I have been talking about all the way around the world as being incredibly labor intensive to put up and down. And then we've got the J3 that is ready to go as soon as the sail crossover is appropriate. But Sally, we've got the view of the sailors on the foredeck flaking up the J1. Talk us through why that's such a pig of a sail.
It's a pretty annoying sail, to be honest. And when you're up there and you know this change is coming, everybody just lets out a little bit of a groan because it's pretty annoying. It's heavy, it's bulky, it's got these big battens in it. But right now, basically, they have to flake it small enough so that it fits in this bag, and you can't really move it unless it's in the bag. And you see them trying to get that. Typically, you lay the bag out first, and then you flake the J1 right down into it. But then the J1 can get stuck, basically, or the bag can get stuck underneath the sail there, and you have to dig it out. Normally, I mean, they're quite lucky right now because it's pretty flat water and there's not big waves coming over the deck. But normally, when you do this change, if you do it uprange when you're going from the J1 to the J2, you're stuck behind the J2 and you're getting plastered by these waves right in your face.
So this is almost the best scenario of what is a really challenging change. But the job is done. The boats are all out after this Aarhus Fly-By. The J3 has now been deployed. Not quite as bad as being slapped in the back by the J2. There's a little bit more room there. But now it's just time to sort of pack up, get out downwind, and then finally turn the corner and start heading back out the Baltic towards Norway. Let's have a look at the virtual eye to see where the next bunch of boats are. So this is Vestas 11th Hour Racing. This is the one that clearly we've just been with. But coming up in the same neighborhood right now, and now indeed crossing the two red boats, Dongfeng Racing and Mapfre, who are on their way out. The rest of the team is coming in. So first up, we've got Team Brunel, followed by their Dutch compatriots on Team Axel Nobel. Sunken Scallywag, glued as always to turn the tide on plastic. So that's going to be coming up shortly. But for now, we're going to land the helicopter and gas it up, clean the lens, and get ready for the next time. But Niall, just before we go off air, final thoughts from you, and what can the other boats expect when they come into the inner port of Aarhus?
A very warm welcome. The helicopter crew have been following the fleet over the last couple of days, and I know the helicopter pilot likes to think he gets closer than anybody else, but actually there's a very strong argument that the fans here in Aarhus get a much better view. I mean, we were so close to the top three boats as they came round at this mark, just off the harbour wall over my left-hand shoulder. As you say, we've got 4 boats left to go. It's going to be tough for them. I mean, it is gusty around here. There are gains to be had, but the first thing you've got to do, get in clean, make the turn, wave to the crowds because they are going to be cheering for you, and then get yourself back out. This race is going to continue over every
There we go.
lane,
Well, fighting for inches, but
we'll
we'll leave you with this beautiful image of the home team again sailing out of their home waters and obviously enjoying the moment and getting a royal send-off. We will be back online again in just a few minutes to welcome the rest of the fleet. So watch the tracker, keep your eye on the next live ping to announce when we go online, and we'll see you then.